Hey, how's everyone out there doing? This is Amy Hamilton, author of The Project Manager, Life is a Project, and The Consummate Communicator, Character Traits of True Professionals. And I am here with Anne Feustel. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Feustel.
Feustel. I am always...
Very close.
Oh, I keep working on it. And she wrote a very, very intriguing book. And when I read the concept of it, and it's called Our Favorite Movies, and she actually talks about how movies impacts your mind and your mental state. So I'm going to turn this over to Anne to talk some about her book.
Okay. So, yep, I've got my book here, Our Favorite Movies. Ooh. And there are several parts to my book. My book overall talks about something called cinema therapy, which is basically what it sounds like, which is movie therapy. The concept is that watching certain movies can improve your mental health, and that can be through personal growth. It can be through help with depression, anxiety, different mental health symptoms. Actually, watching certain movies can even help you be kinder to other people. So basically, I go through my own mental health journey in the book. I have bipolar disorder and generalized anxiety disorder, so I talk about that journey and how I discovered that watching certain movies actually helped me. I go into there's various research around that topic of cinema therapy. I go into the movies that are not helpful to watch. And then I talk about 12 movies that I love. I talk about my thoughts on them, how they helped me mental health wise, how they could help other people. And then I do some fun facts with each movie.
So those were some really interesting comments. And right now during COVID, one of the reasons we're doing this virtual book fair is because it's so hard to get out. And a lot of people are talking about what do you binge, what do you watch, etc. And I think that what you consume mentally is just as important as things like that you eat and that you consume, because this actually impacts your mind. And so I love the concept behind your book. And one of the things I wanted you to talk about, and I want to get the negative out of the way so we can really move into these 12 positives, is what things don't help. What things do people consume that are just kind of like the junk food of cinema?
Right. Um, Probably the number one thing is excessive violence. Now, everybody has a different tolerance for violence. Let's talk about that first because let's say your favorite movies are horror movies. You have a very high tolerance for violence. And, you could be getting a lot out of those horror movies, but they can also affect you adrenaline wise, things like that. For instance, if there's an article that I talk about in the book where they talk about how if you're watching a boxing movie, like one of the Rocky movies, when you see a punch on the screen, sometimes you go like that, sort of your brain is right in there. Your brain is working like you are Rocky and you are getting punched in the face. So some people have a higher tolerance for that than others. I don't have a very high tolerance. There's some people who've told me, they'll watch a scary movie or a violent movie. They can't sleep for 2 weeks or something. I know different things like the book, and it can be true with books too. I had nightmares about clowns after reading the book It. So, those are some of the things. And then also things like racism, sexism. For me, fat phobia is a big deal. Xenophobia, homophobia, transphobia. I talk about all those things in the book about how those are, they're just not good for people to watch movies where these kinds of things are unchecked and not really talked about.
So that's a really interesting topic because so often we just think, oh, this is just entertaining me, but you don't realize like how it is going into your subconscious and how it could really impact you long term.
Yeah, there's been some studies about whether, what kind of mindset you have if you're constantly only consuming negative, hateful, and or violent, movies and TV shows. but not that they necessarily lead you to do anything wrong, just that it can affect your mind.
Yeah, and I think that's really just such an amazing point about how, we may not be cognizant of it. And it may just be little things like it makes us so that we're more prone to being angry in traffic or something. But, all these things, kind of are interrelated. What you feed your mind is the same as what you feed your body. But you
Exactly.
countered that with, you know, a lot of people are like, well, the media and these games and everything, but you're like, no, but there's like really these amazing positives. You can like watch these movies and they can have a positive state on your mind and they can have a positive impact. So could you share the positivity side, the side that's the upside of watching movies and getting this entertainment?
Sure. So I'll give you an example. So one of the books in, or sorry, one of the movies in my book, if I can speak correctly, is Little Women, the 1994 version with Winona Ryder and Susan Sarandon, Claire Danes, Kirsten Dunst. I could keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Christian Bale, a young Christian Bale, very good-looking Christian Bale. Um, so I will watch this movie, and within about 30 seconds to a minute, just with the credits, I will start to calm down. And you might notice that with certain movies, where you just start the movie and there isn't even any dialogue yet, and you're just like, oh, this is nice. There's actually been more recent research around this about the movies you watch again and again, how much they help you, how much it's a comfort that you know what's going to happen. Right now we don't know what's going to happen, right? We don't know what's going to happen with the world, with so many things that are going on right now. So much is up in the air, so much is unknown. But watching your favorite movie or your favorite movies, that's one way to calm down and just ground yourself.
So it's sort of like a comfort food of movies. Like we know, like if I watch The Princess Bride, it ends the same way every time. And
Exactly.
so many people, I've read before that Princess Bride is like one of the most quoted movies of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know for me, that's definitely been one of those movies that since my childhood that I've watched. And last year I was at an outdoor filming or showing of the film. And it was amazing to see all these parents with their kids, like passing it on to that next generation, that love of a movie.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that's one of the movies in my book, and probably the most popular movie in my book. People adore that movie. It's one of those that I think that it's going to be shown 100 years from now. I think I think that's going to be a movie that's going to be. It's already been passing down. It's already been passed down generation after generation. It's just going to keep going because it's just the writing's so good, the acting's so good. It's just so funny, um, and that sword fight in there. I mean, it's pretty fantastic, the fact that the two actors in that sword fight, almost every single frame is them fighting. They trained for months and months and months in order to, do that sword fight. And most of the sort of classic movies where they have sword fights, were done with stunt doubles, but not this one. It's pretty fantastic.
Well,
And
and
I
one of the
know that.
other things in it is the positivity and the messaging, whether it be the true love or like the love between a father and a son. There's so many positive messages that come out of that movie.
Exactly. Yeah, no, there's a lot of positive messages. I think one of them is that, um, e- even if you're different, whether you look different or you act different or you speak differently, you can still be, one of the gang. You can still, um, be accepted because, you look at all the different characters, and there's a lot of strange personalities, and you got Andre the Giant, who's a giant,
Yeah.
but it's okay, and people come together, for the common good, basically.
Yeah. And you look at Magic Max, who's lost his confidence and how he gets his confidence back. And what a great story because we've all had those points where we've been knocked down and lost her confidence.
Yes. No, totally, totally. I know that I've done that a million times back and forth with losing my confidence and getting it back. So Miracle Max is one of my favorites. Billy Crystal is just a comic genius, and most of his lines were that was just him riffing. They spent like about 3 days on that scene, and he was just ad-libbing almost the entire time. And Mandy Patinkin, who played Indigo, um, he bruised a rib because he was holding in his laughter for so long. So and the director had to leave the set and go like remotely to watch it because he was laughing so much. And all the characters were, or all the actors were just trying not to laugh for that whole scene, and it was pretty hard for them.
And it really shows you the positivity, this laughter is engaging, and the fact that they were truly having fun comes across to us, and then we have fun.
Exactly.
So I went over, I guess I picked it accidentally a little bit there. It was like one of my favorite movies, and I just think an incredible journey that you know so much about. Of the other 12 movies that you kind of list in there, like what's one or two more of your favorites, and why did you select those movies?
My number one favorite movie of all time is in there, and the movie is called Inside Out. And for those of you who haven't seen it, it's a Pixar movie, and it's about an 11-year-old girl and the 5 emotions inside her head. So this is based on, psychology research, that we have 5 basic emotions. So we have joy, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust. So we see each of them as a character. And what happens in the movie is that the Riley, the 11-year-old girl, her dad gets a job in San Francisco, so she has to leave their home of Minnesota, and that really shakes things up in emotional headquarters, is what they
Right.
call it. And so basically, um, there's a lot of tension in emotional headquarters with joy and sadness in a bit of an argument, and then they get basically sucked up to a different part of her brain, and joy and sadness get lost in Riley's mind. So they have to try to get back to emotional headquarters because without them, Riley can't feel joy or sadness. And we find out how important sadness is, that it's not something that necessarily should be um, repressed, but it's something that's important, especially when it comes to empathy.
I actually met Joy and Sadness down in Disney World last year. Yay. And
Oh my God.
and I hadn't seen the movie, and so I actually had to go and watch the movie afterwards. And everything you're saying is like it's so funny. I'm like tearing up over a kids movie, but at the same time,
Yes,
like this very profound concepts in the movie that I think helps kids to understand then, and saying it's okay. Like you can't just always be happy, and all the emotions that we have. The spectrum is normal, it's natural, it's healthy. And when we take any one emotion and deny it or repress it, we're not complete as people.
exactly. No, that's exactly true. And it's funny. One of my fun facts is that um, there there was a little girl who was at Target, and then the woman who voices Sadness was there. This little girl asked the voice of Sadness to sign her Sadness doll. So she bought her mom had bought her this Sadness doll that she carried around. And to me, that was just so perfect because to me, that gives me hope this little girl can, if she feels sad throughout her life, she's not necessarily going to repress it. She's going to see, some of the meaning behind the sadness.
I think that's so important, and people may look at it for children, but I think for adults too. Really, just a hard subject earlier is I was talking to one of the authors who did her book on being a survivor from someone who was death by suicide. And in her case, she had written this partly as a memoir for her husband, and how this is such a sad topic, and it's a topic that's hard to talk about. It's something that we don't talk about. But by knowing it's okay to be sad, it's okay to have this grief, it's okay to process these emotions. It's so much better when you're able to just like talk about them. And this movie even makes it so that young children can understand these concepts.
Exactly. It's so good to be able to talk about them. I'm a big proponent of therapy. I do therapy, and I have for most of my adult life. And that's something that's really good to talk about. But also with your loved ones, talking about sadness. It's so important, especially for those in crisis, to really realize, there are places to reach out to, like the suicide hotline and different places like that. I can even put that phone number in the comments when we're done. Um, we don't we want everybody to know that they're not alone, and that, you know, life is worth living and people care about you.
And such a great thing to contrast and balance joy and sadness, because we need both, and it's very natural parts of life, that we have to have, you can't have one without the other. So we've talked about Inside Out, we've talked about Princess Bride. Looking at time, we definitely have time for at least one more, so let's go into one of the other 12.
Okay. Let's go into When Harry Met Sally.
Oh, that's such a classic. That's like so my generation.
Yes, exactly. It came out in 1989, so I'll date myself. I was 9, and I think I watched it either in the theaters or shortly afterwards. So this is a movie I've been watching over and over since I was a kid. And by the way, I just wanted to tell you that the reason why I called the movie Our Favorite Movies is because 10 out of the 12 are movies that I watched with my sister over and over and over again when we were kids and teens. So, When Harry Met Sally is one that we love to quote back and forth, more than any other movie. It's just one that we adore and watch. We will watch it over and over. And you might notice that it's another Billy Crystal role. Like I said, I love Billy Crystal.
Because he brings this positive energy, and you could feel it across the screen.
Exactly. And
So
he's
share with me why, because it's very different than the first two that you mentioned. So what is it about When Harry Met Sally that you feel has such positivity? You have the connection with your sister, but what is it within the story that just really speaks to you?
Well, I think that one of the things that speaks to me is the power of friends. How important friends are in your life, how important it is to have people around you who get you and want to spend time with you. And just, I think it's about both of these characters are kind of weird. Like every character is little strange in their own way. They're not sort of the perfect character like you might find in some movies. And a lot of romantic comedies, like the only thing that's wrong is that the woman is a klutz. Otherwise she's perfect, but she just trips a lot, and therefore that's like who she is. And otherwise she's perfect. So I feel like especially Sally is very complex and a very interesting person, and she has a lot of layers. Like I think there's a lot of scenes where she's acting a certain way, but you look in her eyes and something else is going on behind those eyes.
One of the things I think that's great is it's a story that tells a journey of a lifetime. And so often you see the movie where it's like the clip of a life. But when Harry Met Sally, it goes through their entire bizarre and interesting way that they finally end up together.
Right. Oh my gosh, you just ruined it.
I think everybody's seen it by now. There's
I
no
think most
spoiler
people have
alert.
probably seen the movie right now. And even knowing that, even if you haven't seen the movie, I don't think it's that important. I think it's more about the experience of the movie as opposed to what happens at the end. And it's more about watching these two characters, fall in love over time. When do they fall in love is maybe a question that you could discuss and determine when did it happen, who fell in love first. But regardless, it's just one of those movies that's I don't know if I think like effervescent. It's just bubbly and sweet and but it has the dark bits to it. Harry talks about how just in case he dies, he'll read the end of a book first, so that he knows what it is. But and then he'll, the scene where he's just depressed and he's moaning, you know, and having the divorce from his wife and how much anger he has around that. So there's different layers to that movie, and
And the
I think
complexity of life, because Harry and Sally meet way before they have their future relationships, and then it all kind of ebbs and flows and weaves in and out in very unexpected ways. Like,
exactly, yeah, no, very well. It's funny to me. It's like it can't. I've watched it. It's so burnt into my brain. I can't think of like where it was unexpected because I can't like think of the time before I've seen
yeah,
the
because you would
movie.
have been so young the first time you saw it that now
Yeah,
this is,
yeah.
yeah, that's amazing.
And what's
So,
interesting? So it was the 30th anniversary last year. So I went with my mom to go see it. It was the first time I got to see it in the theater, and there was something about seeing a movie in a theater, which is one of the reasons why I'm very sad that it's not the best idea to go to a movie theater right now. But that experience of watching it in the theater with other people laughing was just awesome. I was so excited. Went to the Alamo Draft House to see that.
that's amazing. I live next to a draft house theater that does second run shows all the time.
Nice.
And I just went before the COVID, and at Christmas time they do all the old Christmas movies and a whole like marathon. And to me, there's something so special about being able to watch It's a Wonderful Life on the big screen, or to watch the what's Tom Hanks Polar Express, all these shows that like, and to be there when you can also see families there with their kids and passing on this
Mhm.
love to the next generation.
Exactly. Exactly.
So instead of going into more movies, so we went over 3 of your 12. I want to say, people like definitely take a look at this, read this book, see how it relates to you, and see how like do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you have other favorite movies you want to add? But Anne, what is your advice for people making conscious decisions when it comes to how they consume their cinema? So they're getting the positivity, and like you said, it's okay to have sadness. It's okay, to experience these emotions, but that we're making it a conscious decision instead of just mindlessly consuming.
Well, I think one thing is to sort of check in with yourself before you watch a movie to see how you're doing. And then you can see how you feel after you finish the movie. But if you're say you're going to watch something pretty violent, maybe check in with yourself at the end to see how you're feeling. Were you really affected by it? Was it a movie like The Hunger Games where there was a lot of death and killing? Um, was that something that affects you? Now, if it doesn't, that's great. But if it did, if you really sort of feel like, oh yeah, this movie really affected me, think about at least maybe not watching those kinds of movies as much. Um, but overall, checking in with yourself before and after is something I always recommend. Another great thing to do is see if you can be completely immersed in the movie watching experience. A lot of people are on their phones or they're talking to somebody else or things like that when they're watching a movie, but to truly get the most out of a movie watching experience is to be completely concentrated on that movie. So that's what I recommend.
You bring up great points, and I'm going to just share a favorite movie of mine for when I have been sad. And I just put this movie on now, and I'm like Pavlov's dog. I know I'm just going to cry. And it's called Crush. It's a British movie with Andy McDowell. And not, I think there's a newer or different movie with the same name or similar name. But this movie, she is a school superintendent, and she ends up falling in love with one of her former students. And I'm not going to tell the details of the movie, but what I will say is it is one of the most tear-jerking, heartbreaking shows I've ever watched. And so when I have been in times in my life when I'm having a hard time letting myself be sad, I know if I watch this movie, it'll give me that opportunity to just let myself feel those emotions. And it's so good to have these studies that people have done to really just show like movies impact you. What you consume in your mind impacts you. So we're going to have to wrap up. Is there any last minute comments or statements that you want to make to our audience?
Sure. I don't know if you can put this on the little banner down for my website, or if we can put it in the comments, but my website is wearewritingwisely.com. And then if you go there, you're going to see that it'll say there'll be a buy now button that'll show up. You can use that to get my book, direct sales. And those books will be signed. I also want to give away 3 books today, all paperbacks. So if you go to my Facebook page, Writing Wisely, the first, second, and second to last person who comments with their favorite movie will get a free book. So I'm giving away 3 books. Just got to go to Writing Wisely Facebook page and then tell me what your favorite movie is.
Perfect. And I really want to thank you so much. And this is being recorded. It will be out there on Facebook, YouTube. I'll give you a copy. This has just been so informative to me and hopefully to our audience. And I want to thank you for your time and for just being part of this event. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I appreciate you. And I'm very in awe of you for doing this event. It's just, I mean, I've been watching some of this, and I think maybe one of the things I'm most in awe of is that your voice sounds, your voice is just fine. You sound the same as you did from the very first video. So, but thank you very much. You know,
Well,
you're
I have
great.
2 more hours, so please watch.
Okay, I will keep watching. You're a great interviewer. And everybody else, you know, you're doing a great job, all you other authors. I'm very glad to be in your company.
Thank you so much, Anne.
Bye.